Hanoi is famous for many different cultural features, while enjoying coffee is also regarded as a special habit. A new day of Hanoian often starts with a cup of hot coffee. For such a long time, the pleasure of drinking a cup of coffee and looking at the flow of people back and forth has become a habit and a culture of Hanoians. The coffee shops in Hanoi now have many changes, from the sidewalks on the street with romantic atmosphere to the modern and updated style and luxurious spaces for businessmen. Under the cultural integration period, ancient coffees that existed nearly a century ago has still been preserved to enrich Hanoi coffee culture. Recently, a website about the coffee shops in Hanoi named as Hanoi Hideaway has founded by Joshua Zukas, a British freelance writer with his partners. With his impression on coffee culture of Hanoi, Joshua and his partners have shared many articles on the creative coffee shops. Let's have a talk with Joshua to explore the coffee shops in Hanoi in our program today.
Hello and welcome to Sharing Vietnam on VTC10 Netviet. So in the first clip, we'll see an introduction of Hanoi Hideaway, which introduces a lot of creative and unique coffee shops in Hanoi. Right now I got a chance to talk to Mr. Joshua Zukas, one of the co-founders of Hanoi Hideaway, and he will share his feelings toward these kind of coffee shops in Hanoi. Thank you, Mr. Joshua, for joining our program today. So first of all, what are the interesting features of these coffee shops in Hanoi that made you decide to create the Hanoi Hideaway blog?
I think the reason that I find coffee shops and cafe culture so interesting in Hanoi is that it kind of encompasses everything. So coffee is accessible to almost everybody. So you can have very fancy coffee shops, but you can also have very basic coffee shops just on the street. You can have expensive coffee, but you can also have very cheap coffee. So it's accessible from that point of view, but also when I say that I feel that it encompasses everything, I feel that lots of different elements of Hanoi culture are expressed through the cafe culture. So there are coffee shops which are very artistically orientated, for example, and also coffee shops that have lots of artistic activities such as music or film nights and things like that. There are other coffee shops that have kind of a different kind of orientation, like they may be very music orientated, for example, and the big focus is on the music that they play and then the live music that they might have.
Right, so is this inspired by your coffee drinking habit or your interest in discovering the coffee shops in Hanoi?
I've always been a big fan of coffee, but I think actually I'm a bigger fan of coffee shops. For me, actually, coffee is not the focus. The focus is having a nice place to go and sit and work or talk with your friends or relax. To have a kind of communal space, but where you still feel that you still feel comfortable and warm.
Okay, so are you interested in the old coffee shops in the last decades in Hanoi, or just the modern ones in recent years?
I'm interested in both. I think that I think what's so great about the cafe culture is that it's so varied. And so I am interested in the very traditional coffee shops, but also the more modern ones. And it's interesting also to see that also there are young people involved in traditional coffee shops as well. It's not just that the traditional coffee shops are reserved for the older generations and like the new coffee shops are for the younger generations. There's lots of mixing. And even when you go to the traditional coffee shops now, the old coffee shops that have existed in Hanoi for decades, often now the business has passed, down the generations, and sometimes the owners are actually quite young, even though the coffee shop feels very old.
Okay, so I'm kind of very curious about these kind of creative and unique coffee shops. Can you lead me to some of your favorite ones in Hanoi?
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to show you some of my favorite coffee shops. Not the best coffee shops, but I can show you just some of the ones that I frequent a lot. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
The first place is the Loading Tea, located under an ancient villa in the old quarter of Hanoi. Loading Tea is a cozy space carefully decorated by the subtle owners. Stepping through the staircase to the old entrance, we find one of the most charming spaces in Hanoi. Besides a number of special features such as ancient architecture with unique decor style, this small cafe brings a nostalgic atmosphere with fancy decorations, including a lot of antiques that have been forgotten.
Mình cũng rất thích cái không gian cổ kính này, thì hai vợ chồng mới về đây và lấy cái tên quán là Loading Tea, cũng là thời gian mà để ra một cái sản phẩm gì đấy mà mang tính hoài cổ như hai vợ chồng ấp ủ.
The couple owners are very hospitable. They always set their love on the drink menu in order to create a comfortable space for everyone. In addition, they are always happy to talk with customers about the importance of preserving the old architectures of Hanoi. Each decorative object in the shop is carefully selected by the owners.
Mình là rất thích cái hoài cổ, cái cũ kỹ, cộng với cả cái không gian của nhà nó rất là phù hợp, thì tất cả những cái đồ đạc rồi cái trang trí ở trong quán là liên quan đến cái thú của mình. Gần như 100% mọi người đã vào quán rồi thì rất là thích thú cái cũ kỹ, cái yên tĩnh, cái gì đấy mà lâu lắm mọi người mới cảm nhận lại được.
To continue our journey to explore the unique coffee shops in Hanoi, we go to the Hanoi House. This is a small house lying quietly on the second floor of an ancient house on Lý Quốc Sư Street. This is a less than 30 meters square room with a loft and balcony. They are all tiny. All the furniture here is made by wood and some few sketchy chairs. The special ornaments cannot be realized through just a glance, but require a careful look to notice the hidden subtleties. Sitting in the corner below the loft and reading a book, relaxing with the small Buddha statues, or sitting in the balcony to enjoy the view of the St. Joseph's Cathedral are the pleasures that can only be found at the Hanoi House. Coffee culture is the form of young culture which is growing and getting vibrant in Vietnam. After the chaos of work and stressful hours, people often go to the fancy coffee spaces to take off worries and relax with their friends. Many people believe that it is also regarded as a way to enjoy life.
Coming back to our talk today, through the introduction clip about the Loading Tea and the Hanoi House, what are the common features of the Hanoi coffee shops do you like?
What I like about both Hanoi House and Loading Tea is the very personal atmosphere. So Cern, who is the owner, Cern and Chang, the husband and wife owners of Loading Tea, they really care about their coffee shop. And they put a lot of effort into the drinks and making sure that the people that go there have a really nice time. That's the same with Hanoi House. The staff member who's always there, his name is Huong. He is very, very polite, and he spends a lot of time caring for the patrons that come in. And I think that that's really special. And the other thing about these two coffee shops, which I think is great, is the architecture. So they're both in really old buildings, around about 100 years, and I really like how Hanoi is still full of a lot of old and beautiful buildings, and I like how they have been converted into spaces that everybody can enjoy. So they're not private houses anymore necessarily, but they're coffee shops or shops. So it means that people who don't live there, people who don't own that land can still enjoy it. We can still enjoy it. We can go in and we can have a coffee, and we can still enjoy that space. And that's why Loading Tea and Hanoi House, I think, are so special.
So in your opinion, what are the differences between the coffee shops in Hanoi and those in other cities that you've been to?
One of the differences between coffees in Hanoi, coffee shops in Hanoi versus coffee shops in other cities is, one is just the sheer number of coffee shops. Like, it's incredible the amount of coffee shops that there are in the city. This is true actually of Vietnamese cities in general. But you know, when you think of cafe culture, a lot of people think of Rome or San Francisco or Melbourne.
Yeah.
They think of these places, and it's true, cafe culture in those cities is fantastic. But in my opinion, Hanoi is still much more special. One, because of the sheer number of coffee shops. That every single street you go to will have at least 5 coffee shops. Yes. You know, every few spaces there's a coffee shop. Maybe it's a new modern one, or maybe it's a very old traditional one, or anything in between. But the other thing that's so great about Vietnamese cafe culture is that, like I said, it's so varied versus coffee shops in other parts of the world. So, you know, cafe culture in Melbourne or Sydney, for example, is great. You know, there's beautiful coffee shops there. But still, sometimes I feel that they all kind of come under the same category. Whereas the coffee shops in Hanoi, there's all kinds of different types of coffee shops. Yeah, and I think that's what's really special about it.
So apart from the good points, what should the owners of these coffee shops in Hanoi do to improve their service quality and their style, in your opinion?
I think that the service quality in the coffee shops in general in Hanoi is actually quite good. Compared to restaurants, I think that actually the service offered in cafes is actually pretty good. I think the most important thing with a coffee shop is personal attention. Is for you as the owner or for your staff is to treat people in a friendly way, not in a distant way, but in a friendly way, and to make people feel comfortable. And I think that is probably the most important.
Last but not least, in your opinion, what should we do to promote these brands of Hanoi coffee shops to other people around the world?
I think one thing is that I think it should be written about more in the local media, but I think also in the international media. I think that because within Vietnam, cafe culture is very well known, of course, but outside of Vietnam it's not. And I think that one way in which we can promote that and show to the world the fantastic cafe culture that Vietnam has is to write about it more, to do more television shows about it, and to really kind of broadcast to the world how special this is. Another thing that I'd like to see is the coffee shops actually working together a little bit more, because still, I mean, the cafes in Hanoi are mostly independent, which is fantastic, and they're independent businesses mainly. 95% or more, 99% probably of coffee shops are independent businesses, and that's great. But in order to kind of remain strong in that way, it would be nice for them to work together, not to see other coffee shops as competitors, but to cooperate with them. For example, you know, organising cultural events between coffee shops, I think would be really special. Music events, festivals and things like that. Not just focused on one coffee shop, but maybe a series of coffee shops around the city so that they can support one another.
Thank you, Mr. Joshua, for joining our program today. And that is also the end of our program Sharing Vietnam. In the program today, we have shared some information regarding to some of the creative and unique coffee shops in Hanoi. And if you like it, you can contact or find it on Hanoi Hideaway or send it an email at sharingvietnam@netviet.net. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you again tomorrow.